Hey everyone, Rose Brown, the accountant therapist here. It's been a little while, but I must say Happy New Year to all those who have not expressed it to as of yet. Welcome to another tax season, therefore, Tax Tip Tuesdays. And for all of those who've not been following along, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. during tax season, I go live talking about a different tax topic, really ones that are of concern that we saw, hey, this was problematic in the past tax season, or this is something that folks need to be aware of, right? And we're talking about popular topics, things that the general public need to be aware of. And again, that's every Tuesday at 7 p.m. right here where you're seeing it, right? And with that being said, I am the CEO of Brown's Advisory and Accounting Firm, where we provide an array of accounting services. And just briefly, we're located in Atlanta, Georgia, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We can be reached via our website, email, phone call, and I'll list all that information in the details section so that you can have that in the event you decide to reach out. Okay, now today's topic, it's not ideal the way I normally kick off tax season, but again, this is one of those things where last year, even now, a lot of folks are having issues with this because of the changes that came about. And the big topic of conversation here is employee withholding, or some may call it Form W-4. Really, the Form W-4 is the employee withholding. But I'm just saying it in terms that a lot of folks are familiar with. Now, what I want to do is cover the what, why, when, the list goes on. Because what happens is a lot of folks, they're saying, hey, you know what? I owe a lot of money. What happened? Or I'm not getting as much of a refund as I used to. What happened? And this is really employee based, right? So again, employee withholding. Now, in America, it's an honor system when it comes down to taxes, right? So they're saying, hey, I trust you to report your taxes or report your earnings and we tax you accordingly type of thing. Now, the Form W-4, that's kind of like a checks and balance type of thing, right? So they have employees complete it, hand it over to their employer inputs it in the payroll system, and from there it calculates and determine how much needs to be withheld from the wages of that employee, right? So that's just to give you a base framework. Now, the purpose of the Form W-4 is so that there's not too much withheld or not enough withheld. And that's where we're going to kick things off as we look at the newer Form W-4, right? A lot of you know the Form W-4 to be that form you give to your employer that says, hey, do you want to put 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 9? And again, this is if you've been working for some time. Now, that older form pretty much expired back in 2019. And when you were filling it out and you're putting 0, 1, all the way up to 9, 9 was to say, hey, listen, if at all possible, don't even touch my wage that I'm earning. Don't take any taxes. This is what 9 says, right? And 0 is like, hey, you know what? Take as much as possible so that I don't owe as much, if you will. Okay. So they've gone away from that way of calculating and determine your taxes to be withheld from your wages. And now they've implemented a new system. Now, it is the new system that is causing a lot of folks to be concerned in terms of what their history looked like versus what their current looks like, right? So in the past, again, maybe they used to get a lot of refund and now it's like, wait a minute, what happened? Or they're wondering how come they owe as much now. Now, with regards to the new Form W-4, and I'm going to show you these as well so that you can kind of get a visual of what I'm referring to. So the new Form W-4 says, hey, you know what? The IRS, and this is IRS, we don't want you to necessarily get a refund more than $1,000 or owe more than $1,000. So they've put it in place where you have this interval of 1,000 plus minus, if you will, right? So, and that's to say, hey, you know what, throughout the year, we want you to take home as much as this will allow you to. And in the event you fill it out incorrectly, of course, you're gonna see the impact of that when you file your tax return, right? So we've talked about that. Now, with that being said, with the IRS changing from that form in 2019, and they started in 2020 and 21, 22 now, current. It's a new system that's in place. But again, a lot of people are unaware. So if you are an employee or if you know someone that is an employee, you may want to share this with them, right? Because it gets complex when you have multiple jobs, or if you have a job plus a side hustle, or you have other activities going, your filing status is a little bit different than single. A lot of different things changes the dynamic of what your Form W-4 will look like, or should look like, shall I say. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly begin to share the component that I mentioned about the Form W-4. So with regards to 2019, right? So 2019, this is what the form looked like. This is the last old form, right? So it's going to ask you your personal information. Then it's going to say, hey, what allowance, what number do you want to put on here? Remember, I mentioned earlier 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 9, right? This is what they used to ask for. And it wasn't too complex for a lot of people, except for getting that 0 to 9, if you will. If you're single, pretty simple. But if you had dependents, married, filing, joint, it added a little bit more complexity. Now, this is the old form. So if you look within your employer payroll software or your HR department and you see this form on file, you are outdated, and you certainly need to make sure that you have the new form on file. Now, this is what the new form looks like. So the new form says, hey, what is your personal information? Just go ahead and list it. Then it's going to say, hey, do you have multiple jobs? Now, when you put that you have multiple jobs here, it adds, again, complexity, right? And I'm going to give you a little tax tip on how to not be bogged down by the complexity of this form, right? A lot of people, they were complaining about it, but the IRS implemented something that made it a lot easier for folks to maneuver this particular form. Now, once you get to the middle of this form, it asks you, hey, how many dependents do you have? What age group are they, right? So if they're under 17, put $2,000. If they're over 17, put $500, right? And you're multiplying that by the number of dependents that you have that falls within that age limit, right? And then you kindly complete the front, and then you're pretty much good. Well, you can say, hey, you know what? I want extra withholding, additional withholding, right? And that's pretty much how this form flows. But again, if you have complexity, it can be very difficult just to have a simple form if you're single, right? So here's what I want us to talk about next, right? What causes an increase in complexity? If you have multiple jobs, that's an increase in complexity, because what you don't want to do is fill out one W-4 for one job and one W-4 for another job. The thing that you need to know is these jobs, they don't know about each other. And unless you tell them about each other, they will only withhold based on the information that they know about you. For example, let's say you have two jobs. One, you're making $20,000. Another, you are making $20,000 again. Each of these only know about themselves. So they're only going to withhold based on what they know about themselves. Therefore, they're withholding based on your tax bracket, those sorts of things. When you file your tax return, this is when things begin to unravel, if you will. Your 20,000 plus your 20,000 come together, they go on the tax return, and they push you into another tax bracket. And then you're like, wait, why do I owe? Like, I fill this out, I put all the information that they asked, but I still owe. Well, the reason is because they don't know about each other, right? And one way to let them know about each other is to complete a W-4 with both of their information in mind. And I'll tell you how to do that in just a second. Okay. Another complexity that is added to completing the Form W-4, the newer one, that is your filing status, right? So if you're single, you're single. You don't have anything else to worry about. You just have yourself going. If you're a head of household, that's not too much of the complex situation, right? Because if you're a head of household, you check the box and you say, I have a dependent who falls within this age group. Now, the real complex part comes when we are married, filing, joint, right? When you're married, filing, joint, separately, the jobs know only about you. So a husband and a wife, each of their jobs only know about them. However, back to the same situation that we had a little bit earlier, When the husband and the wife come together on the tax return, it pushes them over into a tax bracket that was not reflected based on what they filed on their W-4, right? Because if each person is making $100,000, they're only going to be withholding based on the fact that, okay, they're married, filing joint, they're making $100,000, not based on the fact that, hey, they have $200,000 combined. You see where I'm going with this? The complexity increases. And what we're seeing now is a lot of folks, they're starting to get notices from the IRS. The IRS is saying, hey, listen, your W-4, it's outdated. I need you to complete a new W-4 so that the correct withholding can take place. Or if you have multiple jobs, they'll say, hey, you need to fill out one of these for each of your jobs, right? So these are the things that you want to kind of keep an eye out for, especially, again, if you're an employee with multiple jobs, an employee who is married, an employee who has other activities like self-employed activities, rental properties, those sorts of things, right? So you just want to keep that in mind, because they're going to start getting more aggressive concerning the withholding of wages, okay? Now, what do you need to do based on this information that was provided? You need to make sure that you go evaluate, assess, look at your Form W-4 that your employer has. You want to make sure that you have the current one. Now, if you're single, it's the current one, perfect. You don't even need to go use the IRS's tool, right? You just fill out the W-4 based on your personal information and you're done. This is it. Now, if you have multiple jobs, if you have a spouse that you guys file a joint return with, you want to make sure that you don't try to sit and do the W-4 on your own. It's going to be a struggle, right? Because that same W-4, the last W-4 I just showed you for 2024, there is a few worksheets on the back of it, right? And the worksheet, it's going to take you a little while to work through, and it could be, again, complicated. Now, the IRS has introduced a withholding calculator. Now, the powerful thing about this withholding calculator, and it makes me very excited because it does what it needs to do, right? It's connected to the IRS. It's connected to what the new Form W-4 is supposed to look like. So when you use this particular calculator, and what I'll do is I'll drop it in the description as well. But when you use this particular calculator, and you input all of the details, at the end, it gives you a Form W-4. So lo and behold, you don't have to complete it all by yourself. You can go through the IRS's withholding calculator. It gives you the W-4. You give it to your employer. We're good. All is well, right? So when you complete this Form W-4, a couple of things you want to make sure that you have present with you. And it's a very short process, about 5 to 10 minutes, if that, right? Especially if you're single, maybe you make quite a bit, right? You may want to use that calculator to help you in terms of extra withholding. So if you have multiple jobs, if you are filing jointly with your spouse, what you do want to make sure that you have at the time of using this calculator is both pay stubs year to date, right? So you're going to have yours, you're going to have your spouse, or you're going to have all your pay stubs to date for yourself. If you're single and you just have a lot of you have a few jobs, right? Now, once you have all that information, the system is pretty much going to walk you through it. And you plug in the information accordingly, and it spits out the W-4. So that is going to be the easiest way for you to ensure that, one, you have enough being withheld from your wages and you're not having too much taken. So that's what you want to make sure that you're putting in place concerning the Form W-4. It's going to continue to be a big issue for folks who are unaware of it. I can't tell you how many people, as we run payroll at our accounting firm, a lot of people are having issues with this area. So you want to make sure that you are abreast on what to do. I do have clients who say, hey, Rose, can you just sit with me and guide me through it? I just don't want to do this by myself. And that's completely fine. You can make sure that you have someone that you're comfortable with, that you're confident is going to help guide you through that process. All right. Now, you want to make sure, again, if you're married, if you have children, you're inputting that information. One thing that I didn't mention before is if you're married filing joint, right? And the husband and the wife files or completes their Form W-4. Let's say they have one child who is 10 years old. Now, for child tax credit, each child is worth allows you to have $2,000 if they're under age 17, right? So if the husband and the wife is both saying, hey, I have a dependent, which they do, this is the truth. They each put $2,000 on their Form W-4. And I'm just going to share the W-4 here again so that you're able to see it in section 3 right there. So if the husband and the wife both puts that they have this dependent, what it's going to look like when they file their tax return is they had 2 dependents. And what that does is cause them to owe or have a reduced amount of refund. Because with the child tax credit, what the IRS does is they say, you know what, throughout the year, we're going to allocate that $2,000 over the year. Instead of when you file your tax return, we give you the credit. At that time, no, we're going to just kind of split it up throughout the year. So if you told the IRS, hey, you know what, I have $4,000 because you did a dependent here and a dependent here for a husband and a wife, when you file your tax return and it says just one dependent and it's $2,000, now you're in a situation where you pretty much have to pay that $2,000 back, right? They gave you what you were not eligible for based on the information that you completed, which is why it is so incredibly important that you update your Form W-4 with your employer and just ensure that if you have multiple jobs, you're letting them know about each other. They only know about what they have. And the good thing is with the IRS withholding calculator, if you have multiple jobs, once you complete that, go through the process of the calculator, when you're done, if you have multiple jobs, it's going to give you multiple W-4s. It's going to say, hey, give it to this job, give it to that job. This way, you really don't have too much work to do. It's just to take that 5-10 minutes, go through the withholding calculator and pinpoint all that is applicable to you. Right? So you just want to make sure that you hop on that as soon as possible. And like I said, even if this is not applicable to you, I'm sure you know someone who has multiple jobs or their situation is a little bit more complex rather than just being a single person, right? So I hope this was very helpful as we kicked off tax season. This is and a good thing, we're at the top of the year. So this is a great time to make sure that you update your Form W-4 with your employer. If you are your employer because you have a business, update it there as well. Okay, so you want to make sure that everything is in place so that when you file your tax return, you're not concerned because this was a big conversation for me with a lot of clients last year because of the rollout of this particular form. Again, it was a pleasure being with you guys this Tuesday. I will see you next Tuesday as we talk about getting ready for tax season. My name is Rose Brown, also known as the Accountant Therapist, and I will see you next week.